Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Adventures in DevOps. I'm Nell Shamrell-Harrington. I am an principal engineer at Chef and one of the hosts of the show. Greetings from Seattle. If there's any weird noise that makes it on the recording, there is literally a 60-year-old viaduct coming down about 30 feet from my office. So that's been interesting, but that's the happenings in my part of Seattle. With me are my co-hosts, Lee. How you doing today?
Just another day in paradise now.
Another day in paradise. And Chuck, how are you? Chuck, I don't know why I just called you Chuck.
I've been called worse.
All right, Chuck, how are you doing?
Doing all right. I ran a 5K this morning and got a personal best. Fixed the dang car for the family trip, and ready to go.
Congratulations. All right, and joining us, we have a guest this week. We have Bob Quillin. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
That's right.
Oh, right. I got it right. Bob, glad to have you with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and start off. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Bob?
Sure. Yeah, will do. Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Developer Relations for Oracle Cloud, based here in Austin, Texas. So greetings from Austin. And I manage a team of developer advocates that focus on basically cloud native solutions and helping developers engage and develop those applications on top of Oracle Cloud. Joined Oracle about 3.5 years ago from the Stack Engine acquisition. So we were a startup based in Austin, and I was a co-founder, CEO, and so we were an early container management solution for Docker, and we've kind of before the days of Kubernetes. It's hard to believe, but and we've kind of helped the whole Oracle Cloud team bring in container technology and really build out some of the developer solutions and services that are built on top of the Oracle Cloud. So,
awesome. Well, thank you for the introduction. And could you tell us a little bit? I don't know if we've talked yet on the show about the idea of developer advocacy and developer experience. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our goal is really to get out and get into the community, focus a lot on cloud native solutions. We work closely with the CNCF, in particular the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and we do a lot of KubeCon shows, a lot of meetups around the country, around the world. And really the idea is to engage kind of with developers from the bottom up, not do marketing, not make it kind of trying to sell anything, but really kind of educate. Oracle has a big legacy base of customers and applications who are all trying to move to the cloud. And likewise, we work with a lot of startups on the other side who want to work with our customers and work with the community. So really, it's a great opportunity to get people engaged at open source technologies, a lot of container cloud native technologies, and really helping migrate and evolve these solutions to the cloud. And that's kind of, that's a cultural thing. We talk about DevOps today. It's code. It's it's a fun time to be kind of, working with, all these different types of communities and finding ways to help them move forward. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I know. For me, at least, I mean, this has started to change over the past few years, particularly as we have a division of Oracle Cloud up here in Seattle, because this is Cloud City. And I admit, when I think of Oracle, I used to think of databases and Java.
Right.
But it seems like there's way more going on with it now.
Yeah, it's the team up in Seattle is a pretty huge team now, and it consists of a lot of Amazon AWS and Microsoft veterans and folks who were given an opportunity to build basically an entirely new cloud, second generation cloud, based upon a lot of the learnings they had, from helping build out AWS and build out Microsoft Azure. And so I'd say this new generation cloud is really designed for security, it's designed for enterprise, designed for scale, good price performance, but really flat network allows you to bring in a lot of new enterprise apps, a lot of high availability, things that are very disaster recovery focused and enterprise scale. So you think about the database, the Java customers we have, we want to be able to have a cloud that supports them. But what we find also is that since we're running open source on top of this, running Kubernetes, containers, and all sorts of DevOps services, it's a great place to run any type of technology. And people want to modernize their infrastructure and their applications while they're trying to also evolve what they have. So, I think there's like I said, that's the role we provide with developer relations, and Oracle Cloud is a great opportunity to bring both existing customers and new customers too. So,
Most excellent. Now you mentioned something that I've never heard before. You mentioned a second generation cloud.
Yeah.
And now that you mention it, that makes perfect sense. But for our listeners, what distinguishes a second generation or later generation cloud from an earlier generation cloud?
Yeah,
It's like a sequel, except it's better than the original, right?
I was going to say it has Captain Picard in it.
yeah, we all like Captain Picard. So I think in particular, a lot of it was designed from not using an approach that was really based upon virtual machines and a virtualized infrastructure, but something that's very flat, really designed around bare metal infrastructure to start with, which allows us to run almost any type of workload at really high speeds and high performance. So that gives you a lot more security, a lot more design for enterprise solutions, but also since we're developing it with new technologies today, we've kind of built this flat non-blocking network. So it's very easy to virtualize the network itself and build a server infrastructure on top of it. And I think that's been one of the key differences. It's not built on a VM-based architecture. It's really based on something that can support bare metal, can support high-performance apps. And it's really can use a lot of the new open source technologies, which really just pushes us towards that multi-cloud future that I think everyone is dreaming of. A lot of the early clouds kind of locked you in based upon proprietary APIs and that kind of thing. And using more open source technology, we do a lot of stuff with, like I said, containers and CNCF and Kubernetes. That allows you to basically, move workloads from the enterprise to the cloud, across clouds. And, that's a fundamental design principle that kind of was built into this next generation of cloud. So people think of it as a hyperscale cloud, and you have the benefits of coming in kind of later with newer technology and design principles that kind of are focused at the enterprise and Oracle's customer base. And so it's a win-win. You build out these high-scale applications, but also you could do it at a price performance level that's consistent or better with the current cloud providers that are out there. So,
yeah, one thing that I look at these days, and you're kind of talking your way around this, but I'm wondering, because part of this is going to be informed by, we wish we had designed this piece better in AWS or Azure or something like that. And part of it's going to be wrapped around, where people are at now and what they're looking forward to and asking for these days. And so I'm curious, do you have features in Oracle Cloud that aren't in the other clouds? A lot of them have, feature parity as far as block storage and, some of the server hosting and, functions and things like that. But are there things that people are asking you for that you're kind of in a better position to deliver than some of the other clouds?
Yeah. So since we have basically our database technology that we moved into our cloud, we have an autonomous database capability with autonomous data warehouse services, autonomous transaction processing. And like I said, the high performance design of the cloud kind of then allows database workloads that were in the enterprise to easily move into the cloud itself. The idea is that you want to make it easy for existing customers to basically just transition to the cloud and then eliminate all their infrastructure costs and basically just pay for what they use and not have all the operational overhead. So there's the idea of lifting and shifting, which is kind of one of the first moves that people make. If I want to take an application, I want to move it into the cloud, is make sure it works. In some ways, that's the first thing people try to do. We want to make sure we design with the principle of, like, if you move it out of your data center, it's going to work as well or better, and actually have better security and better performance and be cheaper to run in the cloud. A lot of stuff that we work on in cloud native is that it's not just lifting and shifting, it's moving and improving, because when you move stuff into the cloud, you want to take advantage of all the cloud services. You want to take advantage of containers and streaming, and you want to take advantage of different DevOps principles that allow you to maybe use a serverless approach. So we built a lot of that capability around what we do too. So it's some ways we're seeing a lot of folks not only move an application in, but then they start shifting parts of it into maybe a container or a Kubernetes model, although they're still using maybe a Oracle database in the back end, so they can move it incrementally. And that's one of the best practices we've seen as people move to the cloud. They can move things in, almost lift and shift it in, but also then start re-engineering and re-platforming to take on new technology. So, some of the existing clouds are great for a greenfield application. That's kind of what they're built for. You can build from scratch, you just go there and have at it. But these legacy apps have a lot of security, compliance, have a lot of performance constraints. And that's one thing that those design principles went into the Oracle Cloud itself. And, with cloud native technologies, now we can bring those enterprise principles along with open source and kind of get that, together, which once again, you don't usually hear that people using cloud native along with, highly secure and highly performant, but that's another area that we think is an advantage for kind of the design around what we're doing with Oracle Cloud. So
I like that you mentioned people migrating legacy applications to the cloud and having to kind of tease them apart. You almost have to, not always, but there's some refactoring you have to do the application. You find the seams. Mm-hmm. Like if we look at the classic code refactoring book, the author's name is escaping me at the moment, but I will put that in the show notes. But as part of my work at Chef, I was on site. Yes, Martin Fowler is the name of the person who wrote the refactoring book. Thank you, Lee. And I remember I was on site at a customer who worked in the security arena, which is about all I can say about them. Mm-hmm. And because of their security requirements, we were trying to tease apart this web application they had, and they had to use Apache 5. They could not use Apache 6 because Apache 5 was approved and Apache 6 was not. So we had to figure out a way to move something dependent on Apache 5 into a cloud solution or into a containerized solution. And I think it's important, as you alluded to recognize that so many organizations, they can't go the latest and greatest because they have restrictions, but they can still get benefits from moving into a better way of things than they're doing now.
Yeah, we have one of the big customers we have that's kind of going down that path, the CERN, the big linear accelerator out in Switzerland. And they have a big WebLogic set of services and database services they've been running in their own data center. They started moving over to Kubernetes, so using some of the Kubernetes operator patterns to be able to run these WebLogic applications on top of a Kubernetes environment. So what they've been able to do is, I think, get down from a deployment time of hours into deployment time of minutes, and but still keep the WebLogic infrastructure working, but use the overlay of the operator and Kubernetes. And that pattern seems to work very well for people to. It leverages what they know. It's kind of you don't have to actually jump right into cloud native and do everything greenfield and refactor everything. Use what you know. Be kind of inclusive into the idea of using the technology that you have reference points on. And I think we've seen various examples of that in lots of different areas. Java being one of them, and are some of the database technologies too. Is we find ways to give people on-ramps to the cloud itself based upon what they know. It gets them there faster versus having to rewrite the whole thing. So.
Yeah, we've kind of been talking around some of these things. Do you have to refactor to move into the cloud? Or can you move into the cloud and then tease it apart a piece at a time?
I think it's clearly it's dependent on the application, but I think a lot of people, some of the first things we saw, and this has been just even over the last probably 4 to 5 years of containers, is sometimes the first thing people do is drop a whole application or part of an application into a container, then they start teasing it apart. Likewise, a bare metal node in Oracle Cloud is like running it in your own data center. Basically, you have the security, performance, and the isolation built in. So you can actually move things to the cloud and get some benefits immediately. But you're not getting necessarily the benefits of the cloud infrastructure, cloud native technology, DevOps, all those things. But sometimes it's a good first step where you get your feet wet and you learn something from doing all those steps. And I think that's that's been one of the best practices we've seen, is that don't delay in taking advantage of some of the cloud. You can lift and shift things in. From a monolithic perspective, there will be some refactoring required on the edges, and then you can choose how to break things apart. But typically, people, when they move to the cloud, do have some other principles in mind of how they want to benefit from the cloud itself and some of the DevOps benefits too. So.
You've mentioned the isolation that Oracle Cloud provides a couple times. I'm curious, how does Oracle achieve that level of isolation, or at what point does it do the segregation between one customer's environment and another?
Yeah, so I think one of the differences is we use a lot of off-box I/O virtualization. So there's a lot of technology underneath it where they actually just separated off the networking from the server itself. So they operated in different layers. So you can basically allowed you to drop a bare metal node in there and then basically have a full isolation from other types of servers. There's no noisy neighbor issue there. And now if you start getting beyond that, I lose a little bit of the technical details, but it's flat, non-blocking, and they use a kind of off-box virtualization model where it actually allows you to separate the network from the server itself versus having them combined in a kind of a network and server virtualization model, which is kind of what the original sort of first generation systems had to do, kind of based upon your standard server virtualization where you had all the VMs kind of using the same underlying infrastructure, and there's security challenges there. And there's also clearly noisy neighbor issues there too. So, there's a lot of stuff been written about this, like isolation in the network design. But that was kind of, once you were given a clean slate, they were able to build this flat, non-blocking network and separate the network virtualization from the server infrastructure itself, which gives the infrastructure elements a lot more performance, but also a lot more security isolation just by virtue of being isolating network virtualization from the server itself. So
interesting. So when a new customer signs up for Oracle Cloud, do they get their own physical hardware provisioned?
They can. They can, and for performance and price and et cetera. So if people want to have a more disposable system, there's more virtual machines that have been added in as options. There's GPUs. There's a whole range of shapes now. But we were one of the earlier bare metal clouds and kind of how it started. And then we began to break up the virtualization to allow people to have maybe a cheaper disposable VM itself. If they want to have something that's less expensive, or you could have a bare metal node, which is actually still very price performance competitive. And when people want to run these applications, a lot of times they have to have their own system themselves, and it gives them the maximum performance. But they don't have to own the infrastructure, they don't have to manage it, they don't have to keep it up and running. So they have that managed service capability, which is a lot more sustainable and eliminates a lot of the overhead too. So.
Do you see customers using kind of a hybrid solution of some hardware in their own data center and some hardware in the Oracle Cloud?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more use cases for kind of the hybrid cloud model. Some is, they will develop in the cloud and maybe deploy in the on-prem. Development and tests up in the cloud. Some is cheaper, and tests can be it's easy to bring a test up, bring it down, especially in containers too. We find there's a lot of container technology people using for building out test cases, et cetera. Put them up, tear them down, and you're done in a day or something like that. We also see people doing DR, where they will do a DR site, disaster recovery site in the cloud, and run on-prem. So that's another standard pattern that we see. We're starting to see people also begin to move workloads based upon, if it's based upon the regulatory compliance. If it has to stay in country, they may stay on-prem. If it doesn't, it can actually go in the cloud. That's another area that we're starting to see people begin to run workload-specific hybridization that's going on. And then we're just beginning more of the kind of more dynamic provisioning, where you could use things like federated Kubernetes and some of those models to put together a more multi-cloud or hybrid model where it's more dynamic and autonomous. That's a little harder, a little more sophisticated. that's it's just distributed system problem of trying to keep that running. We just had an announcement which we made with Microsoft, interestingly enough, where we built some high performance connections and are doing cloud to cloud interactions, and we'll offer solutions where we integrate. People can run a lot of the Microsoft solutions in the cloud and a lot of the database solutions in our cloud. You might actually see an application that runs across those two worlds. Turns out there's a lot of customers we have that are Microsoft users for the productivity apps and database users for the database apps. That's a standard. We share a lot of customers that have that kind of mixture, and I've talked to a lot of them that are kind of excited about having Azure and Oracle working together too. So kind of we're bad partners in a way, but it kind of works out.
Yeah, I like the way you described that, because I remember wondering about that. I remember I saw the announcement a few months ago around Oracle partnering with Azure, and I thought that's interesting. Two clouds kind of partnering together, but it makes sense that people might be used to Azure for certain services, trust Azure for those services, but still want to use Oracle for the things it does really, really well, which includes databases. So
Right.
I've heard of cloud agnostic applications
Right.
that can be deployed on any cloud, but cloud spanning applications, I think, is something new, and it's absolutely fascinating.
It is exciting, and it's kind of maybe a next wave of potential. You see a lot of customers will come in and say, we partner with these various technology companies, Microsoft here, Oracle here, maybe Amazon over here, and they kind of separated maybe different focus areas for those partnerships and applications and usages and things like that. So, but they're asking for those things to start to integrate, because when they move to the cloud, you can't just choose one cloud if you have multiple applications that span those different partners. So.
Does the Oracle Cloud have any provisions for machine learning or AI workloads?
Yes, we have an AI set of services, machine learning, a lot of big data, data lake, data science technologies. And then, interestingly enough, we work with a lot of companies who are using sort of that cloud native Kubernetes technology underneath to do server infrastructure management, to do all the data science stuff above that, where the ML and sort of the we see interactions happen with something called kubeflow, where Kubernetes is running on right below the machine learning side too. So yeah, AI, ML, big data. As you can imagine, anything related to big data and data science relates to what we do at Oracle with the data technology and database technology. There's a natural extension there, and then people want to process all that technology. That's where a lot of the streaming and this other kind of automation services come in also.
Do you guys focus on a specific GPU platform, or do you have a variety of GPUs to choose from?
We have a variety of GPUs to choose from, and I'd have to look at the details. I haven't actually checked where we are with that, but I know we've done some partnering, and there's some pretty cool stuff that's going on the GPU side. But it's an area that's obviously massive growth and massive potential. So, yep.
What is, or rather, does Oracle have a sort of a managed Kubernetes offering like AKS or the Google platform?
Yeah, and that's a lot of the technology that's come out of some of the original Stack Engine team, a lot of the container technology teams that have come into Oracle, and over the last few years, we launched that almost a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So we have Oracle. It's called Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes. It's CNCF compliant. It's been certified. Basically, it runs as we run it's a managed service. So we run the control plane for you. So all the master control servers are run for you. It's high availability, cross domain, and then you run the data plane, the worker nodes in your own tenancy, but full kind of integration with the rest of Oracle and Oracle Cloud Services. It connects to we have a container registry, which is Docker V2 registry compliant, and there's a lot of automation and auto scaling and all the Kubernetes capabilities that are built into that. So it's been a very successful service. Interestingly enough, it's It has high demand both externally but also internally, because you can think of all the application services that we have in SaaS services that are moving into the cloud and modernizing. They're all building on top of things like Kubernetes also. So we have a lot of demand, and in some ways people call it eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne, but we have to supply a lot of those Kubernetes services to our own internal customers, who are some of the most demanding application services around, because they're delivering services to their end users too. So that's kind of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure not only supports end users, but also supports all the Oracle apps. And that's been a huge push over the last few years, just to consolidate all the SaaS properties and a lot of those applications on top of Oracle Cloud, which puts even more emphasis on security and performance to keep our own apps alive along with our customers too. So.
Awesome. Well, while we're on the subject of Kubernetes, when I found out you were going to be on the show this week, I did some research, and an article I found you wrote back in March, which was Kubernetes, the end of the DIY era. And I think it was Container Journal. Yeah, Container Journal, and talking about what I took from it, and I want to ask if that's correct, was it seemed like you were saying, running your own Kubernetes cluster is way too much of a learning curve for most organizations, and it's better to go with a managed Kubernetes service. But can you speak more to that?
Yeah. It's you see a lot of surveys and a lot of the kind of research in terms of what are some of the big what's holding people back, and what are the big challenges around adoption of container technology, and complexity is a big one. And learning all these technologies. And over the last few years, there was before there was a lot of Kubernetes services, people had to stand that up themselves and run it and manage it. And we went to a lot of conferences where people talked about that journey they went through in terms of how they stood up Kubernetes, how they're running it themselves, et cetera. It's kind of a badge of honor. You can put that trophy on your mantle and say, I did it myself. But more and more, what they're finding is that they don't have to do that anymore. Now that the cloud services have come in, especially over the last probably 18 months in particular, all the major cloud providers, including Oracle Cloud, have a managed Kubernetes service. So it allows you to leapfrog the customers that kind of waited, and that's a broad base, probably about 80, probably 90% of the customers who haven't actually tried to do it themselves, and now don't have to build up all that underlying knowledge, don't have to go through the education and that learning curve to how I manage it, how I run it myself, where you can actually get a managed service to do it for you and keep it up and running. There's a lot of work becoming a Kubernetes expert, keeping up with all the maintenance releases, managing the master servers, the etcd servers, the networking itself, the backend connections, all that kind of stuff. We've done all that work for you, and then we manage that for you, and you just run the application on top of that. So that's where the DIY model, I think, is basically doesn't make any sense anymore, and that goes for people who actually learn to do it themselves. They went through the hard knocks, school of hard knocks. They got all the battle scars, but they were some of the first ones to say, hey, if I had to do it again, I would just use the managed service.
I'm one of those people. I've stood up my own with cops.
Yeah.
This was 2 years ago. It was extraordinarily painful. I don't know. It may be less painful now, but I decided if I was going to do it again, I was going to use a managed service. Yeah.
And they're kind of buggy, and everything's changing as you go. And that's kind of fun for a hacker and a developer. And if you're doing something kind of at home or on the side, but if you do have when you're starting to move a full enterprise app in, it's kind of exciting to see that the maturation happen. We're there's managed services available. There's more of a focus around, monitoring those, observability, around security. A lot of those sort of secondary production level focus areas have become critical as people have kind of moved out of that, just get it working, to now actually get it working, get it running, and make it something that's production level. So and I think that's kind of that nice evolution we've seen, is that first of all, just developers getting it running, getting it off the ground. And, Google did it themselves, and all the Netflix, all the big web scale companies kind of did it themselves, proved how you do it. The best practices were built around it. The cloud vendors came in, kind of built a set of managed services. And now it's kind of democratized all those technologies and opened it up to everyone else. So that's been a pretty rapid path, but it's definitely it's been fun to see and watch how people can rapidly adopt that technology without having to learn all the nuts and bolts. So.
I wonder if there's anything lost from just a knowledge-based perspective, not not necessarily having to go through and do it the hard way.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that's with any managed service. When you go to the cloud, you're expecting some level of abstraction, and there are people to manage it for you. And what we found is a lot of people that did it themselves also moved into the cloud, and that's kind of been the model of a lot of open source now too, which is people can do it themselves. That's what part of the idea. But then you see a lot of and there's some controversy around this, of course, but there's a lot of cloud vendors now that can take open source, make it less complex, make it a managed service. Of course, now they're making money off the open source, and that's a whole nother kind of podcast.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah. So
we'll do a crossover with Sustain Our Software, which is a show we're just launching about.
There you go.
For sustainability.
Yeah, but with the CNCF technologies, and we're a platinum member of that, and we're supportive of that. I think the idea is that now you have the option to run it yourself. You can run it on platforms that are available on-prem. We have one, our Oracle Linux Cloud Native environment has an on-prem integrated container solution that sits on top of the Oracle Linux stack. You could also run in the cloud in any cloud provider you want. So in some ways, it's now pervasively available. You can move these workloads at some level around. And I think that's one of the beauties of the CNCF technologies is that now there's choice. And that was the promise of open source. And it does push to a multi-cloud future, which we all want, or at least some of us want. And I think that's the that's the goal. So.
A story I like to share sometimes is a few years ago, I was working on a political campaign. I'm not going to say which one, but I was working on a campaign. We were dependent on several cloud services. On election day, one of them went down.
Oof. Yep.
Wow.
And I decided, it turned out okay. They got it back up. But I decided at that point for anything that's that date critical, because election day, it doesn't move. And you don't get a chance to do it. Some people would like to do them over sometimes, but 99.999, whatever percent of the time, you don't do it over. I decided for anything that date critical, I was going to have multiple cloud services for every a major component of the application.
Yes. Yeah. And I think having that diversity and having some, it's that chaos monkey that we're all trying to design for, and you try to anticipate it, but sometimes it's just, you can't anticipate everything, but we're getting better and better at it. That's for sure.
One thing that I'm curious about is, we've seen different technologies get adopted into clouds and just kind of the state of work has moved forward. And I see other things coming forward as far as technology goes, and I'm kind of building up to something. So, hang tight for a second. But we see containers become a thing, and then all of a sudden it's not EC2, it's the Kubernetes setup, right, in the different clouds. And then we see AI start to build, and so now all of the clouds have AI infrastructure. So, I mean, where do you see cloud computing going next? Blockchain, VR, IoT, some other hot technology.
Serverless.
Serverless is a good one where we just actually rolled out our Oracle Functions, which is a serverless functions as a service platform built on FN project. The FN project is an open source project that Oracle started about 2 years ago. So kind of that consistency around having an open source approach, building a community around that, and then now actually launching a service to support that. I think serverless is a great kind of adjunct to what we've seen on the infrastructure side with Kubernetes, abstracting away from the infrastructure, having something that's event-driven. Really fills in a big void, I think, for a set of customers. So I think that's going to be exciting. I do believe AI ML is going to help a lot. That kind of goes, the more we keep abstracting up, it's going to help developers be better at developing code, and AI ops is another extension of DevOps, where people are looking to automate and control and take away a lot of the administrative day-to-day activities that are still kind of put on DevOps teams themselves. And IoT reaching out to the edge will bring a lot of those VR and AR and intelligent devices into the cloud itself, and then you process them. Serverless is a great application for those, by the way, too, because you don't have a lot of processing power on the edge. So serverless and lightweight applications on the edge, core processing of the data as it comes into the core around things around cloud native and Kubernetes. You're starting to see some of these technologies maybe find homes where in the future all this stuff starts to make a nice integrated mesh of interactions that I think pushes forward. So, but I think all those things are critical building blocks over the next probably 3 to 5 to 7 years. And a lot of the work that we've done to really strengthen the core and automate all that underlying infrastructure just allows that to happen in a much more free way. So.
One of the more fascinating applications of machine learning I read about recently was the U.S. Air Force has been taking pictures of each of their planes when they come in for landing their fighter planes. And through collecting that data, they've taught the programs to detect when an airplane component needs maintenance before the human eye can detect it. And it's interesting because you mentioned abstraction. I mean, I am the proud daughter of 2 Air Force officers, including a pilot. And I can't imagine, my dad, who was the pilot, thinking, I want to implement this machine learning in this way, use all this terminology. His question, is, does my plane need maintenance or does it not? A
Right.
crew chief's question will be, does this plane need my attention to get maintenance on it or not? And it's interesting because I think the cloud services have really helped with that, abstracting the extremely hard technical area that I think most of us love, at least I do, but getting better at taking a theoretically non-technical question and allowing someone to get an answer to it really quickly.
Yeah, I agree, and it's just when we do a lot of work with our startup community, especially here in Austin too. And I just see there's this creative explosion of innovation related to all those things that you couldn't do this 2 to 3 years ago, but everyone's building an AI, they're building an ML, they're assuming the infrastructure is going to be manageable, and they're not even worried about it as much as we used to be. And probably looking to solve our, some pretty big societal problems. And the fact they're able to start focusing on those versus the dealing with the bits and bytes of the network and the storage and the servers themselves. I think, it makes me feel kind of positive about the future, so we can actually start solving some bigger problems that we couldn't solve before. So,
do you have any anecdotes of Oracle clients migrating to your cloud that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I think the first one I spoke of is CERN. We talk about they're using WebLogic, using database, and beginning to migrate those technologies into the cloud themselves. Be able to move using the WebLogic operator, which we built for Kubernetes, and these operators basically are we see similar customers using the MySQL operator for Kubernetes too. These operator models are great use cases for people like CERN themselves. We have a customer called Beeline that's also doing hybrid models where they're building at a disaster recovery site. That's another one I think is a great example we mentioned before, where they're using the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and they're using a lot of container technology to build out DR sites and still running a lot of their enterprise apps on site, on-prem, but also then beginning to do DR activities up in the cloud. That's another sort of common model. And then we have some pretty exciting services and startups here in Austin that are working with us very closely. I think one I call out would be Plosa, which is doing a AI and ML data model where they do high data processing. But they're using Kubernetes underlying that infrastructure and doing a lot of benchmarking around which is the fastest way to process data streams at high volumes. And good example of a kind of a big data ML application, but using underlying infrastructure, and then beginning to benchmark at some pretty high volumes where they're getting the best performance and how to actually use that. So Flows is one that we work with very closely here, and that's the one I would kind of recommend looking at some of their blogs around what they're doing, how they're doing it, et cetera. So good examples around AI, ML, around hybrid, around operators and WebLogic itself. I think there's we just launched our autonomous database services recently, and we have a service broker built on the Open Service Broker API that we launched for Kubernetes recently. We open source that, and we're just starting to find some customers who are doing use cases around using autonomous database, which allows you to move a lot of the database applications to the cloud. But they're also using Kubernetes applications around linking that to Kubernetes with this Open Service Broker, Oracle Service Broker technology. Service brokers, operators, API gateways. These are all kind of ways to integrate technologies and sort of make it easier to bring in the enterprise customers into the cloud itself and kind of connect things together. So those are some quick examples. Hopefully, I think I hit a few of them. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any case studies on people migrating from, say, Amazon to Oracle and maybe realizing cost savings or performance improvements?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think of who I just talked to recently that went through that. We've seen some customers who have gotten, and these are, I think, available on some of the success stories online, et cetera. People who have made that transition. The price performance characteristics around what we're doing with OCI provides better performance, faster performance, and they're able to actually throw away, basically get massive performance improvements and security improvements at the same time. So we're seeing some of that transition happening currently, along with folks looking to how to bridge AWS together with OCI and Azure too for multi-cloud solutions. So
that's excellent.
All right. Well, we're coming closer to the end of our time. Anything else people want to discuss before we move on to picks?
I guess the only other thing that I'm curious about is, across all the different features, which ones do you see people using the most? I mean, which one gets the most heavily used, or the most, I guess, API calls and things like that?
Yeah. So I think we're not surprised. We see a lot of activity around the container engine for Kubernetes, and that it's just moved into the mainstream, and it's the leading solution within the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It gets the most coverage. So we're seeing a lot of hits on that. About 6 to 9 months ago, we released the Resource Manager, which is built on Terraform and Terraform as a service, and that's actually very, very popular too, because it uses the open standard around Terraform, but provides that as a service too. So that's another area we're seeing a lot of activity where people are using that to integrate different services and automate interactions too. So those are two areas where we're seeing a lot of, and people are using Resource Manager to trigger things in Kubernetes and back and forth. So we also, since we just released our functions product and our events service too, those have been in limited availability, but there's been a lot of activity around people using the event service connected with the functions and serverless capability to connect in triggered events when they drop in an event that's a security event. When something happens, that's a database event, triggering another set of activities, if this and that kind of event-driven activities too. So that has a lot of traction right now in the open source world and with our early beta customers. So a lot of I think anticipation around using the serverless over the next probably 6 to 12 months is being kind of the next big wave too for adoption. And the early indications that's going to be very popular too. So.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and move into picks before we close out the show. I have two today. One is the bug report forums for the Ubuntu Ubiquity package. I was attempting to install Ubuntu on my new ThinkPad, but the installer kept freezing on me. So I did some creative Googling, found this bug report, and a lot of other people confirmed it, and then people posted workarounds. So I was able to get Ubuntu working on that ThinkPad, which I greatly appreciated. My other is a non-tech pick, and that is the restaurant called Canlis here in Seattle. I feel like I'm advocating for Seattle a lot this episode. I'm not doing it intentionally, but Canlis is fascinating because it's fine dining that's experimental but still relatable, is how I would put it, in that, yeah, they're doing a lot of experiments with food, but you still know what it is you're getting. It's still relatable as food. And what I loved was we got there a little early for a reservation. I was taking my wife out to celebrate her law school graduation, and we sat at the bar. I don't drink alcohol, but I got to watch two absolute master bartenders so calmly. Their hands were a blur, but carrying out these very intricate combinations, garnishes, etc. So if you're in Seattle, if you're looking for a really special meal, I highly recommend Canlis. And with that, Lee, how about you?
Thank you for that recommendation. I've been needing to take my partner out to somewhere nice for a while now myself, so we will check that out. For me, I've got 3 picks today. The first one is a news article on artificial intelligence made from a sheet of glass. They're basically doing a machine learning implementation that requires no power. And once they've got the the algorithms figured out, they can somehow encode it into a sheet of glass. And when they shine light through it, that represents somebody writing, handwriting a number, whether it's the number 2, the number 8. The pattern that light going through the glass will end up identifying like what the number is. And I'm probably butchering the Cliffs Notes version of it, but it's just from a tech perspective, I thought that was super cool. My other pick for this week is the Hugo web framework. I've been migrating some of my old personal sites from WordPress to Hugo, just because there's no need to really run the whole database and caching infrastructure for a 3-page site that rarely changes. And Hugo has been making that process just incredibly easy, and the sites are fast and responsive, and I've enjoyed them muchly. I've also been reading the book Micromastery, Learn Small, Learn Fast, and Unlock Your Potential to Achieve Anything by Robert Twigger. And that's been a very interesting take on how humans learn and how you can sort of optimize that process and build up complex, deeply learned patterns from very simple repetition.
Awesome. Chuck, how about you?
Yeah, I've got a few picks here. So one is I just set things up so that you can recommend topics and guests for the shows, including this show. So if you have a topic that you want to hear us discuss, you can put it in, just go to devchat.tv/adventures in DevOps. That's with dashes in the middle of those, /recommend, and you can give us a recommendation. I just threw a few things in there so that it would have something in it. Some of them looked interesting to me, and some of them just kind of were the things at the top of my head. But yeah, so go ahead and throw them in. You can also go upvote the different topics. So if there's one in there that you think you really want to hear about that somebody else suggested, you can also vote on that. I'm using a system called canny.io, that's canny.io. So I'm going to shout out about that as well. I've been reading a book that's really got me thinking about a lot of the ways that I do things at devchat.tv called Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's kind of a classic business book, and really, really, really enjoying that, and really enjoying thinking about it. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I've got going on, and we'll be spending time thinking about.
Awesome. Bob, do you have any picks, things that have been useful to you in the past week or so?
Yeah, I was throwing in some, I'll throw in some things in the chat around different videos, et cetera, that are kind of maybe highlights of stuff we talked about and point people to. I'm picking places to fish on my vacation right now. So that's where my picks are right now. So
that sounds fantastic.
If you ever make it out to Seattle, I can recommend some spots along the rivers and lakes out here.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm going to head up to the Lake Tahoe area and do some fly fishing up there soon. So
nice. Where can people find out more about you, about where you write or tweet, or even if they want to learn more about Oracle Cloud?
Yeah, so definitely check out the website. Oracle.com has tons of content. Cloudnative.oracle.com is one that our developer relations team maintains, and that has a lot of content around blogs and solutions and some of the focus areas around sort of the container native world. So definitely that's cloudnative.oracle.com is a good place to check out. Developer.oracle.com has a broad set of tools that go from Java to database to Kubernetes, et cetera, too. So for developers who are looking for, something that's not just cloud native, but and container centric, but something more broad across the whole Oracle sort of foundation, that's another place to check out. A resource for information also.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bob. This has been great. And I think I'm going to have to create an Oracle Cloud account just to see what you guys have been building over there.
Cool. Thanks. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, it's fun kind of hearing it from the other side where it's a cloud provider telling us how they see what we do.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Bob and Lee and Chuck, thank you to all our listeners. And we will see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com.